Good afternoon. It's Sunday, June 16th, 2024, around 1 p.m. here in Champaign, Illinois. You're watching Co-op for Two, and you're here hopefully for the last letter of the Dear Holmes set we've been playing called the Bewildered Blacksmith. Today we're going to get the official solution from Sherlock Holmes. I know I'm not the only one looking forward to hearing the explanation for some of these mysteries that still remain with us. Let's check in with the chat, see how everyone's doing. Make sure the audio and video is broadcasting. According to my screen, it is. Let's do a little bit of bookkeeping before we start here. I think this week we'll be doing a bunch of extra streams during the evenings. Probably Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, something like that. I definitely want to get Body of Evidence played. Maybe something else. On Thursday or Friday? Friday, I can't remember which one. We played the fourth of 6 cases from Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective West End Adventures. Took us 4.5 hours and we struggled. We had some real complaints about the case. I would say most of the cases in the box, in the original box, are pretty good. We played the reprint, the Space Cowboys reprint, which is that red box there. And we compared the cases, the old and the new, and they really tried to make the new case harder in an unpleasant way, and it really felt unfair. So I think it's hard to go wrong playing the originals. It's sort of odd how often the reprints by Space Cowboys feel like they've sort of missed the mark. I'm not sure what the answer for that is, other than the translations back and forth. Melissa says, my son and I played Body of Evidence. It was interesting. I'm on the record as being very suspicious of it. I'm suspicious of any game when there's a really hard push to get reviewer copies out. And it looked a little gimmicky, but I've heard from people I trust that it was good. So we'll see. YouTube says 15 concurrent viewers. All right, what else do we need to talk about? Next week, at our normal time when we would be playing the play-by-mail games, the 1 p.m. time slot on Sunday, I will instead do another game design update talking about high and low, developments with the art, developments with software tools. I'm wearing my Gen Con t-shirt. I will be at Gen Con this year, August 1st through the 4th or so. I will be bringing high and low with me. If you're interested in playing it, let me know, and you're going to be at Gen Con. Let me know even if you're not interested in playing it, but you want to meet up. I'd be happy to meet up with any of the viewers. Okay, so if there's nothing else to talk about, if no one else has any projects they want to talk about, let's do a little bit of recapping about our case here and the outstanding questions we have. So we got a kid that showed up, Edward, no shoes, seemed like he was passing out asleep, exhausted, deaf and dumb. The blacksmith's house who he arrives at is the one that hires us. At some point, the kid disappears. They sort of adopt him as a son. He's there for a couple weeks, then he disappears. And we get hired, and they're asking around town. Eventually, they get not a ransom note. They get a note saying, stop looking for him. Then we get some clues in the village. There's the ransom note there. We get some clues in the village about a florist who's seen with a little girl, even though she's not motherly and it's clearly not her kid. And we've got a carpenter who is ordering huge amounts of nails from our blacksmith for reasons unknown. in the last letter, we got most of the pieces of the puzzle. The carpenter and the florist are adjoining properties. They're involved together in some clearly illegal business. The carpenter is seen sending carts to the train station to London and then taking them back. Some of those carts clearly contain flowers for the florist, but some have holes in them. Maybe they seem to be being carried on a heavy cart. Seems like they're probably transporting kids to some extent. The carpenter also has a second job as a gravedigger, as a hearse driver, wearing the same outfit that freaked out the kid that showed up originally. When Watson arrives and searches the florist and the carpenter's property, he notices a couple of things. One, we noticed he hears banging that feels like it's muffled deep within. That seemed to confirm some of the theories the channel had about the kids being used for an illegal mining operation and maybe the nails being used to build scaffolding for the mine. Then we get a little bit more of a clue about what the florist is up with, because the girl has disappeared, the girl that was spotted in the forest, and the local constable says, hey, you know, this reminds me, a town 10 miles away, suddenly a family suddenly had lost their kid and suddenly had this new auburn-haired little girl running around. So it seems like our florist is involved in some illegal adoption stuff. Watson comes and he sees the whole property of the carpenter. Carpenter says he's been building more coffins, but Watson doesn't really see many coffins. But he does see 70 boxes, 70 crates, all but a handful with delivery address to the florist's brother in London. Then he sees the 2 carts, one of which looks like it might have wheels matching wheels seen in the mud at the blacksmith's house where the kid was kidnapped from. When we search around the florist's and carpenter's property, we find a trapdoor leading to a downstairs room with some vials labeled laud, which we think is laudanum, which is a sort of a sleeping pill mixture. And we see half-completed packing crates, a couple of half-completed packing crates, some sawhorses and timber. Looks like they're probably making crates. And 2 8-year-old young boys without shoes, just like the boy Edward who showed up at our blacksmith's house. And that made us think, okay, the kids are being used as child labor to build crates. It's possible they were taking apart the crates as well, but it seems like they were used to build them. The carpenter and the florist seem to be at each other's throats, blaming each other a little bit, but not disagreeing, agreeing with that, pretending the kids are just staying with them. The 2 boys, one is crying, but they don't seem to be reacting strongly. They don't seem to be talking, so maybe they're also deaf and mute like the kid that showed up at the blacksmith. And then lastly, we find some records in Mrs. Hamer's, the florist's, notes. 7 invoices for £60 each, marked well within the last year, and marked for safe transportation. She says the invoices are about the carting business, which is the carpenter. She says the carpenter's business is rapidly growing. So that's where we left off. Let me try to summarize the sort of competing theories we have and maybe some of the problems with them. So one early theory was that the carpenter has got some secret mine operation, and he's using these kids, bringing in kids from London, homeless, mute, deaf kids from a school in London or something, and they're dying off while they're digging the mines. They're free, cheap labor. And the muffled hammering, digging would seem to be evidence towards that. On the other hand, Watson examined the property. He didn't see any mine, and he did see 70 crates, a huge number of crates. So another theory is the florist operating this illegal adoption thing. We're told she becomes friendly with all the mothers that are grieving from kids lost to cholera or whatever, and that she's bringing in kids from orphanages or from mute abandoned kids, and she's doing this illegal sale for 60 pounds per kid. We're told the carts are going back and forth between London, and it definitely makes sense that we think kids were transported from London to this town. And an early theory was that she was kidnapping kids and sending them to London, but then we thought, well, they would notice in a small towns if kids started disappearing. So it makes more sense that they're being imported from London and then she's adopting them out. And that makes sense in terms of this kid, Edward, who stumbled into the blacksmith's house, passed out, is we think they're drugging the kids as they ship them from London to this town. And this kid, maybe the cart hit a bump, the cart fell off, the kid escaped, whatever. I do think there's a little bit of a problem with our theory, though, and I think maybe we need two explanations. The problem with the illegal child adoption theory here is that huge numbers of crates are going back and forth every week. Every week, a whole cart full goes to London, and a huge cart full comes back. We know there are some flowers in some of them, but we've got bills of sale for these illegal adoptions. There are only 7 in the course of a year. So it's obviously not all about illegal adoptions. And it's a very strange number of carts and trips. Every week, we're told, a whole cart full of crates go to London on the train, and then the same week they come back. So it's really hard to see how much business is being done back and forth. And I think like the most logical thing to me is that it's a crate bill. Like this, the audience seems to disagree with me because they don't think it's nefarious enough. But you could imagine that the simplest explanation is that this carpenter has figured out that he can make a lot of money selling crates and using them to transport stuff. And he's got child labor building the crates. So it's sort of a dual track thing. She's got a side business of illegal adoptions, and he's got a child labor business building crates. The only thing is that would only make sense if, and he's selling the crates to London. You know, London's a big city. They need lots of shipping containers. And that's why you'd have to keep building more crates. So to me, that's the most logical, albeit not very nefarious, illegal operation here, that he's building crates with child labor, and they are being transported to London. We're given the impression that they're going to London on the train and then coming back. But maybe it's more, maybe we just don't get the full picture. And what it really is that each week, 20 crates go to London and 3 come back with flowers. and an occasional kid. To me, that seems the most reasonable pair of illegal operations here. It's an illegal child labor crate building operation. And we were thrown off the trail by thinking the crates are coming back and forth. And occasionally she gets a kid that she adopts out. However, I understand that the audience finds that not very appealing. The other option, however, is that there's a huge illegal child operation going on in London, and we're only seeing one hub of it. And that the carpenter is building the crates that get used to send these kids out from the brother's address everywhere. But 70 crates, that's so many crates. And I think no matter how you look at it, it just doesn't seem plausible that those crates are going back and forth. And if they were, why would you need so many new nails? It's only if it's a crate building operation that you need so many nails, and then you don't have to postulate that the crates are coming back and forth each time. And then I have one more question that I'm very curious to see if we're going to get an answer to, and I worry we're not. One of the best parts of these letters was in the first letter, when I believe it was Rob, or someone pointed out and said, the kid is deaf. He went to sleep. Everyone went to sleep in the house, and they woke up and he was gone, and he clearly let himself out. And we now believe he was kidnapped back. And so the question was, how did he get roused from sleep if he's deaf and didn't sleepwalk out? And I hope we get an answer for that. I'm not sure we will. But we have had a couple of people propose alternate theories. And one of them I want to draw attention to was Marco, who proposed this point. He said, once the children are settled in their new family, they could be used to rob them. This was something we talked about in the beginning, where we talked about, did Edward visit the blacksmith? Was he planted there to rob from them? You could imagine that it's not just an illegal adoption, but that they're sort of planting these kids to rob and bring stuff back. But I don't believe it. The main reason I don't believe it is she's making 60 pounds doing these illegal adoptions. It just doesn't seem like that would be combined. If you were going to rob, you'd have the kids for free show up. This is not how it normally works. The kid doesn't normally stumble into a house and get adopted. Normally, it looks like the florist is making friends with suffering parents and then saying, I can get you a kid for 60 pounds. All right, so does anyone have any other theories they want to talk through or get on the record before we read the solution? DJ Moneycut says, did the first letter give us a set of questions to answer? No, it didn't. Now, let me talk about that for a second. Those of you who have been joining me for these Dear Holmes games know that in the more recent editions of Dear Holmes that started this year, they've changed the format a little bit. First of all, they've gone to a total of 4 letters, but more letters in each envelope. And they've also adopted a thing where the first letter tends to give you questions that you should try to answer at the end. But this last month, we've been playing an older case. We've been playing a case from 2021 that was sent to me by a viewer of the channel, and I'm very grateful for that. And if someone watching here has older letters, I'd love to have them to play because the new letters can't keep up with us. They don't actually get delivered once a week. It's more like once every 2 or 3 weeks. We do have a new full set to play, which we will get to in 2 weeks. Okay, so we don't have any questions. Dorp says, the only crime here is unnecessary regulation against good old-fashioned child labor. Melissa says, I still wonder about the drugs. I think the drugs are being made by the woman, and she's using it to drug the kids as part of this operation with her brother. Rob says, the main unexplained question for me is the large amount of crates. Other than that, I think it's all about the illegal adoption business. DJ Moneycut says, I think there's some kind of grave robbing or body selling component. Well, that was another theory. I think if you looked at that last letter, the florist and the carpenter were sort of on each other's nerves, as if they were sort of blaming each other or getting each other into trouble. So it feels to me like they're sort of each have their own sub-illegal business going on involving these kids. I think it's half of them are... Some of the kids are being used for child labor and some of the kids are being used for adoption. That's my theory. And I have given you my answer for the crates, but I agree it is a confusing situation. So Moneycut and Dorp seem to be onto the grave robbing, dead body stuff. Several of our theories are not mutually exclusive. Kids are being taken from London and sold to mines in northern Britain. Okay. There were some clues about a smell and odor. I wondered how that will be relevant. Yeah, we were told that the florist had a smell, but I wonder if it's because they're burying bodies of the kids that die, or it's the smell of the chemicals making the laudanum. Digital Harvest says, this town sounds horrible. All right, well, unless anyone has any more theories they want to get on the record, I'm going to go through and open the solution from Holmes. All right. Here we go. From Sherlock Holmes, 221B Baker Street, London, England, Saturday, 18 October, 1890. That's exciting. Dear Mr. Goulding, the very unusual case which you brought to my attention only a few days ago has proved to be an unexpectedly elaborate affair. I'm glad you wrote to me as early as you did, for a swift resolution was of the utmost importance. Having received your first letter, I recognized immediately that the appearance and rapid disappearance of the young lad warranted attention. In my experience, children who are homeless or otherwise uncared for rarely have carriages sent for them. Yet that is what the tracks you found indicated. It was also apparent from his easily frightened demeanor and his attire that Edward had escaped some degree of mistreatment prior to his arrival at the forge. Though evidence was scarce, I couldn't help but consider that this already looked to be a case of abduction. With Watson dispatched to Norfolk to assist you on the case, I then received your second letter. Your account of the conversation with Mrs. Roper, the vicar's wife, was most enlightening. The appearance and later disappearance of the auburn-haired girl was too much of a coincidence when set alongside Edward's case, which prompted a new line of inquiry. Was Bethany Hamer, the florist, somehow involved in this intrigue? Yet your second letter also drew my attention to James Hoddy. His claim that he was finding it difficult to keep up with the demand for new coffins seemed plausible enough, but conflicted with Mrs. Roper's later assertion that there had been no recent burials in Loddon. The gravity of this lie wasn't yet clear, but luckily Dr. Watson was able to look into both matters the very next day. With his arrival in Loddon, Watson confirmed that there was one obvious and immediate link between Miss Hamer and Mr. Hoddy, and from there, the investigation progressed at a rapid pace. From my extensive collection of street maps, I had ascertained that Hamer and Hoddy's businesses sat directly next to each other. However, Watson's legwork revealed that both locations had once been part of a single plot. My suspicion grew when Watson mentioned that he could hear the faint sound of woodworking during his encounter at Hoddy's yard. This immediately reminded me of Hoddy's first conversation with you when he stated that he worked alone. It was also one of the supposed reasons he struggled with the demand for new coffins. This seemed all the more peculiar when I then learned about Watson's visit to Hamer's shop. The florist claimed to have no husband or children whatsoever, just a distant brother, Thomas. And more importantly, there seemed to be no signs of the mysterious auburn-haired girl either. So who might be working in Hoddy's yard? Furthermore, Watson's discussions with one of the waitresses at the Swan revealed that Hoddy and Hamer were not just business associates. Rather, they had also become emotionally involved. Knowing that they shared not only land but also an interest in each other made the case for their conspiracy even stronger. I already suspected that Edward, or the girl, might be hidden on their property, but when Watson verified that she was still unaccounted for, I began to fear worse and analyze Hoddy and Hamer as a definitive pair. At the time, Watson had already witnessed evidence of her brother's part in the scheme as well, but I must admit I'd yet to realize myself. Based on Watson's observations, it became clear that the iron nails from your forge were almost exclusively being used to manufacture flower boxes and packing crates, some with holes drilled in the sides, all of which helped explain the carpenter's sudden need for nails. Hoddy's assertion that he needed coffins because of the rise in deaths locally was simply untrue, which of course begged the question, why lie unless there was something or someone to hide? In addition to the above, I took note of the fact that Hoddy's ceremonial attire, a frock coat and tall hat, seemed rather similar to that of the gentleman caller mentioned in your first letter. Remembering Edward's described fear of the man, I began to speculate that this well-heeled caller might have very well been his captor, if not just similar in appearance. Watson had also noted an ornate hearse in Hoddy's coach house. His standard carts may have been too bulky, but I wondered if his more ornate hearse could have left the impressions you initially found on your drive. With some clarity, I then read Watson's postscript, which pointed out how the note you'd received gave off a faint aroma. Instantly, I was reminded of his account of the florist's shop, where he was struck by an unusual and somewhat unpleasant odor. Was it the selfsame smell, I wondered? Coupled with the fact that Hamer's shop was previously a laboratory, this was a strong possibility. And considering that the shop itself was linked both physically and otherwise to Hoddy's own business, I became confident that a physical investigation of both sites would be imperative. I theorized that in all likelihood young Edward, and possibly even the auburn-haired girl, would be found somewhere on the former two's premises, but only if we acted in haste. The muffled noises originally heard by Watson and the accounts of the auburn-haired girl both suggested that neither Hoddy nor Hamer was working alone, despite their firm assertions. All the while, Watson's account of Hoddy's yard indicated that he was far more committed to crafting large crates than coffins. There was no evidence of what was being transported in these crates, but that was precisely what alarmed me most. Once again, thinking of Edward's troubling reaction to the caller and realizing that large crates with air holes drilled in their sides might be the ideally discreet vessel for a live creature, I asked myself, was Hoddy our culprit, and did he plan to send the boy away? Perhaps to Miss Hamer's brother. That would explain the crates addressed to T. Hamer. It was also possible that the child or children arrived in the wooden crates instead. Was Hottie coercing them into labor, I considered, or was the man sending children like the auburn-haired girl away? Both seemed equally appalling and surprising. But as the questions lingered, I recalled a detail from my dear Watson's chats at the Swan. Bethany Hamer, contrary to what most might assume, seemed to show great sympathy towards grieving mothers. This fact is what first led me to consider the truth. Bethany and Thomas Hamer, with the assistance of Hottie, were running a baby farm. Watson's subsequent letter detailing his investigation of their property immediately helped confirm this hypothesis, while the investigation itself stopped their enterprise before it progressed any further. When Watson informed me of P.C. Melrose's possible encounter with the auburn-haired girl, I was all too sure that my suppositions regarding their baby farm were correct. Their investigation then went on to confirm my suspicions one by one. First, Watson's visit to Hottie verified my earlier proposition that his ornate hearse might have left the tracks near your forge. As Watson recalled, its wheels were roughly a third of the size of the 6-inch wheels on his standard carts. In other words, approximately 2 inches wide, like the tracks you measured on your drive, Mr. Goulding. Then, of course, Watson and Melrose discovered the florist's cellar and the children themselves. Their unwillingness to speak and the description of their attire suggested that at least one of them was more than likely to be Edward. The bottles in the cellar that were labeled laud seemed to be in use and undoubtedly contained laudanum. This tincture, derived from opium, was surely the cause of Edward's inexplicable drowsiness when he first arrived at your forge. Knowing this, I still struggled to see what Hottie and Hamer might hope to gain from free labor, until reading of the invoices subsequently discovered by Watson. The paperwork made it obvious that Hamer and or Hottie were receiving payment for the transportation of something quite precious. And in my experience, few people would feel the need to request particularly safe delivery of flowers. It is a relief that the children were removed from their premises when Watson discovered them. James Hottie and Bethany Hamer are now in police custody, facing a number of charges, including that of child abduction and false imprisonment. This morning, I received a telegram from the Chief Constable of Norfolk to say that both are likely to be remanded by the Loudon magistrates to appear at the next quarter session, where they and Thomas Hamer will also face the court. Although Hamer and Hottie were questioned by the police yesterday evening, they maintained that they had played no part in the abduction of Edward, and that, in fact, they had done nothing but help children in need. However, Miss Hamer's brother, Thomas, has cooperated with my colleagues at Scotland Yard. Originally, assuming we'd apprehended his associates, he has helped expose all the outstanding details of this curious affair. Through her connections to the funeral trade, Miss Hamer would come across families who had lost their beloved children. Preying on their grief, she would offer to erase the pain of their loss by introducing them to a child in need of care. If they were amenable, terms would be agreed upon, and Thomas Hamer would then be instructed to find a homeless, destitute, or orphan child, ideally matching the description his sister provided. Using laudanum to drug the children, he would eventually carry them by cart to his Shoreditch warehouse. There they would be packed into wooden crates for the journey to Norfolk. Heavily sedated, yet able to breathe through carefully drilled holes, they would arrive at Geldeston in crates, where they'd await Hottie together with the packed flowers. The regular nature of the consignments helped them to pass largely unnoticed on the rail route. While thorough in procuring children as instructed, Thomas Hamer was not meticulous in checking the nature of the youngsters he trafficked. When Edward arrived, Bethany Hamer discovered he was profoundly deaf and therefore deemed him unsuitable for the family he had been promised to. This evidently occurred again a month later when a second lad arrived with difficulties in speaking. In both cases, Hadi took charge of the boy, putting them to work and providing them with meager rations of food. They were first housed in the stables, but after Edward escaped and was recaptured at the forge, the boys were moved to the florist's cellar, which the criminals believed to be a more secure penitentiary. Shaken by Edward's escape, Miss Hamer felt that they were getting careless and sent the threatening note. She was convinced that you would neglect to pursue the matter, especially if you knew that he was, in any case, safe. She clearly underestimated the lengths you were prepared to go on his behalf. Children like the auburn-haired girl, who now resides in Stockton, were successfully sent on to their new families within days of arriving in Loddon. Thomas Hamer confirmed that they had abducted 9 children altogether, and from the 7 who were placed with families, the enterprise had generated an income of £420, which was split between the Hamer siblings and James Hadi. The invoices found on Thursday provided evidence of these transactions. As you may know, Norfolk Constabulary is continuing to make every effort to trace the families of both boys. However, for the moment, I'm delighted to know that young Edward has been returned to you and your wife. I've been told the police are content for both boys to remain in your care, if that is what you wish. If they are confirmed to be orphans, steps could then be taken to make you their legal custodians. Until then, I wish you both, and Edward and company, all the best. And so ends a fascinating and fruitful case. Yours sincerely, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Okay. There we have it. By Holmes' reasoning, purely an illegal adoption and capturing operation. Child labor, yes, being used by the carpenter, but not as a routine matter. Let's see what the chat thinks of all this. I guess you would put this in the category of games that were wonderful in that they spurred some real debate and discussion, trying to solve details that we couldn't make sense of. And the way it achieved this is by really not resolving those questions. There really is no explanation for why he had to make 70 crates and why the crates were traveling back and forth every week. They've adopted 7 kids out. 9 kids were transported. Really does not make sense with all the crates being built. So, and the question about how was the kid roused if he was deaf, also unanswered. So it's not it goes in the second pile, right? Like the third pile of cases are the cases where everything gets resolved and makes sense with some aha moments, and those are the amazing ones. And then the worst cases are the cases that are too easy, everything wraps up, and there's never any interesting discussion. And then we've got the second pile of cases, which is the way you cheat and get a case that has lots of interesting debate and discussion. And that's that you have details that really don't make sense and don't ever get resolved. So if you had to choose, though, between the 2 easy cases without interesting things that don't provoke any discussion, you'd rather have this kind of case, but those details weren't resolved. Rob says, would have been better if they didn't mention the 10-fold increase in nail orders in the 70 crates, because that was not really vital for the case. That is such a great point. It did not need to have 70 crates and the constant building of crates to make this story make sense. Everything about this case would have held the same if there was no super increase in crates being built and transported every week. So I prefer my explanation better, that this guy was actually doing a huge business in crates, making a fortune off child labor building crates. And he was sending the crates to London, and he said every week 40 crates, and 5 came back with flowers and kids every once in a while. Digital Harvest says maybe they mentioned the 70 crates to highlight there was an increase in available labor. Yeah, except, I mean, that was my theory, except he doesn't, according to this, he doesn't appear to be selling crates. But maybe Holmes just overlooked that. Remember, our meta theory of these Dear Holmes cases is that Holmes is not involved in this system at all. This is our theory. Our theory is that, our meta theory is that this isn't really being signed by Sherlock Holmes. This is some imitator. So he's missing details. So I'm not sure he's really solved it all. They're counting on us to solve them. So I think it was an illegal crate building operation. I would have taken a mining operation. But we were basically right. DJ Moneycut says they were basically doing a good deed, which we stopped. We're the bad guys. Except Holmes thinks they're kidnapping kids off the street, maybe who are orphans. But yeah, I agree with you. They might just actually be placing orphans. But, you know, if you're running an adoption agency, you need to be regulated. Although in the 1890s, were the adoption agencies really regulated? Was she really doing anything worse? No sign of dead kids buried under the floorboards. That's what I thought it was going to turn out. This guy was going through so much child labor that the kids were dying, but apparently not. It doesn't seem like they made enough profit to make it worthwhile. And Sleeping Dragon points out the other thing is that did this really have to be illegal, or could they have not have called this all in the up and up? Like, surely those orphanages would be happy to adopt out kids if you could find a parent for them. And drugging the kids to send them in crates. 9 kids over the course of a year, doesn't it seem like it would be easier to just travel on train with the kids? Like, would you really need to drug them? That seems risky. Wouldn't it be better if you're only dealing with like 1 kid a month at most to just take them on a train, buy them a lollipop and put them on a train? Rob says, Perry says, I think Holmes missed it. They kidnapped dozens and sold them to factories. Rob says, not a terrible case for the most part. It held up, inspired some good discussion. I think it's one of the better ones we have played so far. I mean, I would agree that it did create lots of interesting discussion, and most of it did get solved at the end. So I would call this a good case. Not my favorite case that we've played. Not my favorite case, but a good case. And I'm okay with it not explaining other things. I do think it's unfortunate, though, that the cleverest insight about the kid who was deaf opening the door and us thinking that must mean something. I do think it's a shame. I'll bet that the author didn't think that through. Marco said, we did struggle to find something really illegal about it. I think in retrospect, actually, when I heard Holmes had a very good point. And that's the one that did make my crate theory where I got worried about it. He said basically, he said here, Hardy's assertion he needed coffins because of the rise in deaths was simply untrue, which we knew as well. And then Holmes says something very astute. He says, which of course begged the question, why lie? And I do think you could still ask that question. He's clearly building huge numbers of crates. So why not say I'm running a crate operation? Even if you want to, you're hiding the fact that you're transporting kids, why would you lie and say you're building coffins? Why not say you're building crates? That's not illegal. It doesn't give anything away. That seems like a real flaw. What possible motive does the carpenter have for not saying, I'm using the nails to build crates? There's nothing illegal about building crates. We still don't have an explanation of why he has to build so many crates. I think he's running a crate. He's selling huge numbers of crates, and he's using child labor, but still, why not just say that? If you're building too many for one man to do it, then that would hold with coffins or crates. So that's a flaw. There's absolutely flaws here. Rob says, no explanation for how they managed to reacquire Edward. What do you mean? They went and, oh, you mean how they wake him up? I mean, they drove the cart to the house and got him. Harry says, better than the trained parakeet case. I think I like I like the trained parakeet case better. Sorry. I like the trained bird better than this case. Rob says the trained bird was one of the worst cases. All right, well, we're giving spoilers away, which we shouldn't do here. But I did like that case better. Everyone seems to agree. Not me. Sleeping Dragon says, my theory is they craft the ending based on the early answers sent in for the contest aspect. That's quite possible. That's quite possible. We came up with a name for such a case. We theorized that they were doing this with other Dear Holmes cases. We called those glitch mysteries. And we coined that term to describe a mystery where you write some beginning stuff that's full of weird contradictions without explanation. And then you wait till the end to try to unravel it, to try to make sense of it. And, but actually we were beaten to that by the Agatha Christie Crime Writers Club and the book The Floating Admiral, where the writers took turns writing chapters and developing it as they go, building on what the other person wrote. So it's not a new idea. Well, I still enjoyed it very much. The whole part about selling a massive number of nails, making the forge busy, was ridiculous from the start. How many damn nails do you need for a crate? Well, it's true. It is true. Although you have to remember, back in that time, they're hand-making nails. Nails are hard to come by. All right. As a reminder, next week we will not be playing Dear Holmes, but we will have a game design update about High and Low. If you're interested in writing mystery games, even mail-based games, I want to make some mail-based games for High and Low. If you want to take a crack at making a game like this, I hope you'll tune in next week. Join me for the update. The tools are being built to help you write cases. I'd love to have more people writing cases. I'll help as much as I can. And if you write a case, we will play it on the channel. We've played 2 cases so far, and you can download and play my case called The Wrong Book. It'll take you 4 hours. It's a difficult case. And then there's the case by Water called Past Never Dies, and the case by Rocky called Hit the Ground Running. So there are 3 cases for High and Low, but I'd love to have more. I also want to thank the person who sent me this set of cases, who doesn't want to be named, even though I've already named them. I I'm trying to get my hands on more old cases from the series. If you are watching this and you have old cases that we haven't played, I'd love to have them. I'll be happy to trade other games or other cases for them. The week after next, we will be playing Dear Holmes again. We do have a new case to play. I want to thank also the Patreon supporters of this channel. We haven't had a new Patreon in a couple months, but I really do appreciate it. It does help pay for these things. It helps pay for the Dear Holmes subscription. It is appreciated. Okay. Anything else? Digital Harvest says, give me a suggestion for another case on the channel I can watch today. Well, I have a suggestion. There was something very special we played on this channel. We've been playing these Dear Holmes letters, which is letters written to you over the course of the weeks. Okay. We had a viewer on the channel, Matt, and I made a suggestion. That wouldn't it be cool if we had a case written specifically for us that we could reply to and would get letters back custom written for us based on our reply. And we actually did that over the course of a month and a half. Matt sent us letters. We wrote back full replies and got back custom replies. It was a great case, one of the best cases we played. And it's hard to believe it was a one-of-a-kind case written specifically for this channel with replies written tailored to what we sent back. You can watch that on the channel if you want something really special. The only bad part is you're going to feel sad that you weren't with us during it. But if someone else feels like trying to reproduce that experience, I'd love to play it on the channel. We had some help from Rob creating some documents, from Debbie Levy doing some editing. It was really quite a special experience. All right. Well, these play-by-mail games are always fun. It's fun to have the same group of people come back week after week over the course of a month or so, playing the case. You guys make it fun. I'm just here to enjoy the company. All right. I'll see you next time.